Welcome back to Moonstruck right here on Riot Radio. I'm your host Ryan, and today we're going to be talking about another concept in the MCU, just to, return to some of the topics we covered last week, just about analyzing overlapping themes in film. And we're going to be talking about the concept of black and white magic that's represented in the MCU. And maybe we'll start with the first picture of just the Darkhold, which is this artifact that's seen in the movie Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And it's actually a pretty good movie. I've seen it multiple times, and I would say that in terms of encompassing a lot of the themes which we touch upon, revolving, this kind of spiritual energy, this movie really depicts this balance quite well, just in terms of this being the embodiment of kind of the left-hand path that we would say, kind of aligning more with the side of this chaotic nature, or embodying those elements of greed and how that can affect other things in the environment, right? So it's almost like building it or acting from a place of anger or greed or some kind of emotion that is fueled off a basis that is impure will lead to a result or influence that is by nature impure, right? So when we talk about these concepts of this book, for example, that is made by Chthon, which is the first demon that it's referenced to in the movie. This is the lore behind the book. That this is kind of this concept or this artifact that embodies those qualities that are built upon this foundation that is basically exerting the user's will in a twisted form, right? So in the movie, we kind of see it used by Wanda, and she's trying to reunite her family, but she's going about doing that by basically just deterring anybody who stands in her way by extreme force if necessary. So she pretty much, like, slight spoiler alert here, if you don't want to hear this, like, slight spoiler, cover your ears, but she kind of lays waste to Kamartash, and essentially all of the sorcerers who are there are like attempting to protect this one girl, and Wanda's just like, to hell with it, and just like blows up the whole joint. And eventually they end up going through the multiverse and having this big chase, and she uses this power which is known as dream walking, in which she utilizes the book to propel her consciousness to possess a version of herself that exists in an alternate universe. And a lot of these principles, like they talk about in the film dream walking, they resemble a lot of actual spiritual abilities which exist in the real world. We've talked about things like astral projection, we've talked about lucid dreaming, we've talked about the ability to experience these out of body or more beyond the body states, right? Where we are separating our consciousness from the identity that has been associated within this physical reality to then experience some other reality. So in very extreme states of astral projection, it actually has been reported that people have been able to almost like possess or inhabit other versions of themselves, right? So these are people who have like kind of practiced this for a while. Me here, I'm kind of just referencing experiences that other people have had. I've not experienced actually this phenomenon myself. But it's interesting to note that when we talk about like the spiritual lore behind these concepts, that it's not foreign to our depiction of like this form or expression of self, that this is actually possible, right? That this is actually something that can occur, and in doing so can, have like basically outcomes in both directions, right? So this is the Darkhold, which kind of embodies those qualities that are associated with this. Mordo in the film, he refers to it as a desecration of reality itself, right? So why does he refer to it this way? Is because you're basically forcefully possessing another version to influence their actions or influence the outcome of their actions to attain some kind of end, right? To use them basically as a means to an end. And Wanda possesses the alternate version of herself to then, kidnap this girl and then use her powers to, essentially travel between the worlds. So, herself and her other body could come through to this reality, right? So, in any case, that, that was actually kind of a little bit of a big spoiler for the plot. But the movie's been out for a little time, so, fair game, right? But in any case, I would recommend that you see that movie because there's actually quite a bit to the plot revolving around these themes of just like life and control and, kind of releasing also the control to kind of connect with what is right in front of you, right? So I'm not going to get into, basically explaining the whole plot here because I want to stay focused on how these themes that are represented in film overlap with a lot of themes that exist in real life revolving these topics. So we're going to stick to the artifacts as much as possible. So, in the comics, actually, this is an artifact that is also recognized, and interestingly enough, it does depict in the film how, though there is a Darkhold in every universe, in every version of reality throughout the multiverse, there is only one Book of Vishanti in the whole multiverse, right? In this nexus point. So that's kind of... Well, we won't get into that yet. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. But essentially, I would say that that's one of the parallels or contrasts between these two artifacts or books, right? I don't know why this sign always goes off mid-thing, but yeah, I don't know. The magic is affecting it weird. So, yeah. In any case, we'll get back to talking about this book, but yeah, it seems like only when it's sitting in this one spot it acts weird, and then anytime I move it, it's fine. But in any case, we'll get back to talking about actually this book and how it mirrors some of the things we do see in, like, we can even draw parallels to, like, let's say like modern occult or modern magic, right? Like we can look at like almost like works of the left-hand path, we're talking about here, in this book, actually the Darkhold, which is, fictional, it's said to have created the first vampires or the first werewolves or the first beings of the night, basically, right? And it was created by the first demon. So this is all kind of encompassing around this twisted version of reality or manipulation of reality to get what the user wants, right? And it in turn affects that user, right? It's said in the movie the Darkhold exacts a heavy toll, right? And you could see like Sinister Strange, like, he has the third eye, or like this eye in the center of his head, right? Or Wanda, she has the black fingers, and the alternate universe Strange, like 838 or whatever the universe was named as, what's her name? Christine puts it that, like they titled the universe 838 or whatever. So essentially we see with that universe's Doctor Strange's fingers are also black because of course he was using dream walking to attempt to defeat Thanos in their universe. So or seeking to come up with a solution to the aspect or problem that was Thanos at the time through using this book. However, it did not turn out that way. and they ended up finding the other book, the Book of Vishanti, and that ended up being the key to them defeating Thanos. So these books are actually pretty relevant in the Marvel Cinematic Universe when it comes to influencing all of the cosmos, seeing as basically both of these books, which are counterparts to each other, have enough to rival Thanos and his usage of the Infinity Stones, because you see him dead at the end there, and then they I'm not gonna tell what happens with that version of Doctor Strange, but I do recommend that you see the movie because it is a really good movie. So in any case, that's essentially what happens, but we can see parallels with that too, like real life themes when we talk about the left-hand path. When we talk about the left-hand path, we're talking about vampirism, or we're talking about the ability to basically project your will in a forceful manner or something like that. We're talking about influence through kind of manipulation, or the ability to forcefully create change even if it's not aligned with the external world. And this is kind of representational of this left-hand path. You can even see people who have talked about this in the left-hand path, such as like Crowley. If you know about Aleister Crowley, he wrote a lot of works around magic, and specifically the left-hand path, and how this kind of is reflective of this nature of exerting one's will onto reality and getting what one wants just by sheer will alone, and basically that being, as he put it, the whole of the law. So that's a pretty interesting concept, especially when we look at this book and how it overlaps with these other texts. And there's numerous I would say manuscripts or ancient texts or readings or works about, or grimoires, let's say, about this left-hand path dynamic, which is associated with these qualities that come from just like power and influence and drive in spite of everything else, basically. So this is utilizing, almost, you can think of it like one half of the spectrum, right? You have light, you must have dark. So this is one half of the spectrum, it's dark, right? So this sign is acting really weird, but in any case, you can kind of see how this parallels some of the themes in this movie, right? In the very beginning, Wanda uses it to summon demons to come after America before she actually decides to come after herself, and she says that the explanation for that is that sending those demons after her instead of myself was mercy, or was me being reasonable, right? So and then she obviously gets into using the book, that is, to further her intention or further her influence by possessing other versions of herself, and it's basically deterring the whole Illuminati just on her own, actually, with the alternate version of herself who's not as powerful as the original Wanda who exists within the original universe. So it's all kind of a little bit of a complex outline to illustrate just through, or imagine just through us talking about these concepts. So I do recommend you see the movie if you are interested in these concepts where film is paralleling aspects to our world and our reality and the way we see spirituality and the influence of things in the outside world. So that is basically the aspect of the Darkhold. Now we go on to what is referred to as the Darkhold's antithesis, which is known as the Book of Vishanti. And yeah, see, just right on time. Guy's always on time. So there is a saying, divine is always on time. Look at that. And in any case, this is the antithesis to the Darkhold, and as I said, there's only one of these books within the whole of the multiverse, and the Vishanti was this group of powerful sorcerers or powerful beings who created this book of pure white magic, which was basically this, how would I say it? This grimoire which had the ability to counter any spell or counter any black magic that it could occur in any situation or any circumstance. And it was made to be basically the opposite to the Darkhold. And it's essentially based on the concept that this book can give a sorcerer whatever power they need to defeat their enemies. And this was the book that they actually did utilize against Thanos and ended up with them defeating Thanos. So this is like a artifact that rivals the, or maybe even surpasses the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Stones, which is, this ability to influence all of the cosmos itself, right? So we're talking about very complex systems of energy in process, right? Or in this state of expression. In any case, this was the instrument that they were attempting to retrieve in the plot so that they could defeat Wanda, and potentially it could have even freed her, freed anybody from the influence of this book or the damage caused by the book, because it was basically a book on reversal magic or reversal spells or counter spells which could nullify black magic, right? So, and this was a book based on pure white magic. And if we want to see parallels to this when we look at, real world magic, we can think of now the right hand path, right? And this is associated more with the concept of the light and, aspects that we've talked about in the past, the archangels, the angelic beings, the planetary forces. We're talking about very pure aspects of nature that are meant to negate the effects of things that impede or twist the natural flow that the cosmos is meant to work in. So if you think of it like, say somebody hexes you, right? This book would contain the reversal magic to that hex, or the ability to undo that which has been done, right? So it's not necessarily a book that, like the Darkhold, will just give you whatever you want. It's more of a book that resets the cosmos to the alignment that it's meant to be in without this abnormal disruption in it. So, while the books may not give you the exact same thing, they are opposites to one another, just as light is the opposite of dark and dark is the opposite of light. We're talking about two ends of the same spectrum that are both needed to fulfill a certain purpose or aspect of creation. In any case, I don't think this... Oh, there we go. So if I don't breathe, it should be okay. But we'll see. But in any case, that is the basis around what this book is meant to embody, right? It's this book that's been ensorcelled by the Vishanti, which is this group of magical sorcerers. I believe there was 3 of them, and it was meant to essentially be this book that was of purity, so divine and so high in magic that, as it's said, and as I believe I said it, can give a sorcerer whatever they need to defeat their enemies, right? So it really stands to reason that these artifacts really can influence the cosmos just as much as, Thanos with his gauntlet, because that's what they use to essentially in turn defeat him in that particular universe. And we don't get to see it too much in action in the film. I'm not going to go into spoilers about why or whatever, but essentially we don't see the activity of it that much in the film, but I think the reason why that is because there is a theory actually about the film that it did give Doctor Strange what he needed, because he was able to see one page of the book that allowed him to actually utilize the Darkhold in a controlled manner to then get what he needed to dream walk into the other reality. And you kind of have to watch the film, but in any case, it essentially in some way did give him what he needed, right? And he was a sorcerer who had the intention of using the book for its purest nature, right? And in turn, it did give him really what he needed to defeat his enemy, in a sense. So we could see some parallels between this book and, let's say, and I don't want to essentially say that this is a direct correlation to any of these books, because it's not. We could see it maybe in akin to some of these spiritual books like the Bible or whatever, which I would say contains certain very relevant passages, like, let's say, Revelation, where it talks about the churches and that mirroring aspects of the celestial nature of the spheres, and aspects of the angels, and kind of the internal mechanistic aspects that encompass how the human body and the realms kind of work together and work with the angelic essence of the angels. So I would say, if it was to relate to anything, maybe a specific aspect in some of these books where it outlines or details what would be termed pure white magic, right? And one of the things to note about when we discuss, black versus white magic, is that white magic is an expression of how the cosmos is supposed to be in its most aligned state, right? Because think of it from the perspective of, if everything is built on your pure intention, nothing needs to be meddled with, right? Because it just is. It's perfect as it is. There's no need to adjust something. There's no need to meddle with it. There's no need to try and twist it or form it to fit in a specific way like the users of the Darkhold do. But instead, in this scenario, you're just expressing the nature as it should be, but negating any interruptions or any interference that might occur when somebody who is against you in this situation would attempt to impede your progress or use energy against you or against your intention, right? So this is really a book that is meant to ensure that the purest will or expression of the cosmos is seen to, and that the divine aspect of creation, which is white magic, is not disrupted. So I think that's about as much as I can actually get into in depth with how those two express themselves in their nature. But it is very interesting, because I think that, we obviously talk here a lot about spirituality. We delve into certain aspects of cultures. And the reason why I don't try to cover religion too much in depth in and of itself is because, though there are parallels between spirituality and religion, the aspect is that you don't want to subscribe to a theory ever fully, and you want to, there's almost a inherent knowing or inherent intuition which comes with understanding what is a representation of the highest good. And that's why when you read certain aspects of the Bible or of religious books, some passages or some pieces might resonate with you strongly and others not so much. And that's because I feel like when any author writes a book, they probably include a little bit of truth and some stuff that is maybe what we would term as filler information, right? And I think that kind of is the essence of what these aspects encompass, right? Or are meant to encompass in some sense, right? Like, you're not gonna, the chances that you're ever gonna read a book and every single page is going to be perfectly outlined in order for you to like get the essence of what you need from that thing absolutely is very finite, right? And it's just because, like, that's the nature of life, right? Nothing is ever so pure in its fullest extent that there is no almost like rocking of the boat, right? Like, you can think of it almost like if you're a ship on water. You know, if you come into some rough water, the chances of the boat like moving from side to side, that's like a possibility, or you know, it might even be probable that that's going to happen or transpire, right? But it doesn't mean that, like, you know, everything is like tossed out, right? It just means that there are going to be points in the book that resonate strongly or are impactful or representative of what the intention was when that book was created, and there's going to be aspects that you go, okay, well, maybe this is useful, maybe this is not useful, maybe you know, even like, even it's a possibility that maybe I'm just not looking at it the right way at this point in time. So that's all aspect, right? But when you're experiencing that as a reader, chances are that the author was experiencing that in the writing process when they were writing that book too, where they felt like, okay, that was a great page I just wrote, or that was something like spot on which I just did, right? And then they might write the next page and they'll be like, okay, well, you know, that didn't really resonate as much, even though it's on the same topic. So seeing how these books, maybe we could get both the images up again, like we'll get the first one, and yeah, so we like seeing how a book like this kind of represents that aspect of like black magic, where one is forcing their will upon reality to get something out of reality. And then maybe we could go to the other picture now, and then now seeing this where we see the reverse, or the truest nature, where now you see the aspect of reality as it's supposed to be, in its not meddled form, right? In its purest state, right? So maybe we'll just keep that up. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's a pretty like interesting image how they kind of ensorcelled this book really to really represent purest aspect of the divine. And it's interesting how it's kind of in this place where it's not really even at somewhere which is like very reachable, which we can tell by seeing it in the film, right? It's at this like junction between universes, where, you know, this magical book is basically on this like, I don't even know what you describe this like almost like pinnacle of a temple or something like that, where all the bridges are broken around it and everything's just floating in space. So it's kind of interesting to just see what is around it and see what it encompasses it, because it still is presented as a book that has a very mystique around it, but it's a mystique that encompasses what the book's nature is supposed to represent, right? So something that is almost like almost like this one rare flower or plant among like all these other aspects that are maybe like parallel to it, right? So when we're talking about cosmic influence or cosmic purity, or the expression of the cosmos in its purest form, like even when we think about like a concept like that they say in like spirituality or religion or ancient texts or whatever, heaven, which is so fundamental to word people use, what is the first thing that comes into your mind is almost like fluffy clouds and white light, right? So what do we see around this book? Fluffy clouds and, you know, a light in the background, right? And white light surrounding the book. So seeing how some of these overlap with aspects of our culture and can be seen in film is interesting, because I think sometimes film even depicts human thought or human expression, sometimes clearer than what we've actually written or made manifest in the material world, in terms of just like concepts that resonate along that same line of thought. Because, you know, when we talk about black magic and white magic and, you know, the expression of the cosmos, we're talking about something that is so fundamental to the aspect of existence that I would say it's a complex thing to try and encompass within one text just by itself, you know? Like, you know, we can even look at and see, like, you know, various cultures have their spiritual book, right? And, you know, they would say, well, like, this one's different from that one, and that one's different from this one. But we haven't seen something that embodies a book that is completely on black magic, or a book that's completely on white magic, or anything like that, right? So seeing this concept portrayed in film, where we can see that visually, like, this is definitively what this is, and this is definitively what that is, it's a way of outlining the intention of what we discuss in the real world through film, and it gives almost like a material aspect to a concept that we see as very fundamental to the way, like, our perception of, like, in this case, magic would be, right? So, because, like, you know, we could say that all these books that we've talked about so far cover or encompass some aspect of what we're talking about, but not ones that directly translate. But when we're talking about film, where we're talking about or constructing fictional ideas that can be an embodiment of something that doesn't exist within our world, or doesn't exist yet, or is not a direct translation, we can get a almost imprint or a expression of that thought in the form that is in direct resonance of what we're trying to explain, right? So here, Darkhold is the direct expression of black magic. Here, the Book of Vishanti is the direct expression of white magic, right? And I think one of the interesting points about the Book of Vishanti being the only one that exists within the whole multiverse is that this artifact is almost a central piece to all of creation, in the sense that, you know, black magic, or whatever we can determine as stuff always breaking down, or based on the concept of rebirth that aligns more with the aspect of destruction. But when we talk about the aspect of a rebirth that aligns more with creation, because both of those need to have a balance, that light in its form usually tends to culminate. You know, if we could think about the sun, you know, like, for example, where does the sun have its most brightness? Around the sun, right? Because all of light seeks to be together. It seeks to be in union, seeks to always be accumulated at one point or one source, right? So it stands to reason that could possibly be why the Book of Vishanti is the only book that is made manifest in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, and or should we say in this multiverse, right? And there's not multiple versions of it, because it's something that is almost the one purest version of expressing itself, right? So yeah, that's pretty much all I have on, you know, the film. You know, I think that when we talk about these concepts, we're really touching upon something very fundamental to the nature of the cosmos. And if we can apply that in some way to us, even just thinking about, like, you know, something as simple as, you know, the principalities that we operate with as we do things in the outside world, it can translate back into these aspects of film, right? We talked about, last week how the Infinity Stones represent either aspects of ourselves or aspects of existence that we can see or are tangible in some form or some way. These are maybe less tangible in the sense where, you can see the effects of magic, and sure, you can touch it on an etheric level. You're not really touching it in the sense of, me touching this table or whatever, even though physics would say, okay, well, you're not actually touching it, there's repulsion going on, right? Or whatever. But regardless of all that, it being something that is not as tangible sometimes leads it down the path of it feeling like it's something disconnected from you, but understanding that it's not really disconnected from you, because it's a fundamental aspect of your being and the expression of yourself, makes it actually something that is maybe the most tangible thing you will ever have within the whole cosmos, right? So you can think of it just as real as your personality, right? So in any case, that is kind of what I have for you today, just on these two books in the MCU, and maybe we'll wrap it up there for today. So yeah, we covered the Darkhold and the Book of Vishanti, how it correlates or overlaps or parallels with the themes in real life that we can see with the left and right hand path. I encourage you guys to like and subscribe to the video and help support the channel, because it really does help. Follow me on at top_sorcerer on social media, and you can follow us on DC Media Hub to view the work that we have here at Riot Radio. And I will see you guys next time, and I do encourage you guys to do what you can to help support this, because you guys make this work possible, as do all our guys behind the scenes. Shout out to you. Thank you for your work as always, and we'll see you next time right here on Moonstruck.